We live today in his information age. But long before our signals crossed the oceans, there were the printing presses of a burgeoning city.
We celebrate his birthday as 1706. The truth is that he was born in 1723 when he came to Philadelphia. That was the only place that he could have been Ben Franklin.
Franklin is one of 1,000 people who come to Philadelphia every year in the 1720s. Captives, refugees, runaways.
Everyone had this idea that once you arrived in Philadelphia, it was a new canvas, the place to ask, what does freedom really mean for everyone?
So imagine it's 1723 and you've arrived here. You're essentially running away from Boston. You're dirty, you're hungry, you don't have money, you don't know where you're going or what you're going to do.
If you're Benjamin Franklin, age 17, you arrive desperately poor, a fugitive indentured servant, a printer's apprentice, a searching soul.
When he was in Boston, it was a city that was almost 100 years old, and it had layers and layers of heavy authority. Philadelphia is brand new. It's barely a generation old.
In North America, Philadelphia is the biggest city, and yet it's only 2 blocks wide.
The word backwater comes to mind. There was a lot of raw commerce, around 10,000 people, but people thought that Philadelphia could become more.
5 years after the death of the city's founder, William Penn, the chaotic port teems with immigrants from 3 continents.
Population is growing unstoppably. It's a natural home for all kinds of ambitious people.
All kinds of entrepreneurs, self-promoters. These people, all thrown together, competed with each other, fought with each other.
You have gangs, you have pickpockets. Visitors were scared to be here.
There's no police force.
There's never actually any plan for a municipal government at any point.
We have an unpaid citizens watch. How effective are they?
Diseases were rampant. Life could be and often was short.
Poverty and wealth live around the corner from each other.
It's amazing people are not dropping dead more often.
All kinds of needs are not being met.
You don't trust the water, so you drink alcohol.
Children drank at breakfast. When you wanted to throw something away, you open your front door and throw it in the street. The city's a mess.
And there's not a whole lot in the way of what you might call civic spirit.
That's the Philadelphia that Franklin came into.
Five years after Franklin arrives, another man enters Philadelphia's port. His name stripped away, his body sold to James Logan, the governor of Pennsylvania. Logan calls him Sampson.
It's quite obvious that Sampson was not his name.
Africans were transformed by that experience during enslavement, taking their names away from them, preventing them from speaking their language.
Your whole identity became constructed for you by the person who owns you. But who owns your body and your spirit?
Force compels Sampson to labor day and night in service of the most powerful man in the colony.
James Logan was William Penn's agent, running Pennsylvania for the Penn family.
Logan's held every office imaginable, usually at the same time. He was the land office, justice of the court, he's a member of the council.
From his plantation at Stenton, north of the city, Logan plans to turn Pennsylvania's frontier into agricultural gold. Profits that will make Philadelphia rich. But a wealthy city must think for itself.
Logan is the great intellectual of his generation, anywhere in the colonies.
He collects the largest private library in North America, more than 3,000 books. He shares them with botanist John Bartram and mathematician Thomas Godfrey.
It was like the internet of the 18th century, except it's all owned by one person. And not only did he control it, he decided who was going to have access to it.
Benjamin Franklin resented authority and just thought that there ought to be merit that decided things, and not birth, and not privilege, and not wealth.
On his first day in the city, Franklin encounters the hard-working Deborah Reed, who assists in her father's carpentry business on Market Street. They form a working partnership as she introduces the ambitious printer to the wide-open city she knows so well.
She had a lot of spunk and guts about her. She understood Philadelphia society, she understood Philadelphia politics.
She's managing some of his accounts, and she's even doing things like selling salves and other medical supplies out of their printing office.
Philadelphia provided economic independence for women, together with a Quaker belief in equality. It creates the space for people to innovate. And that's what you see in Philadelphia.
But angry workers are fed up with the overcrowded and filthy streets. In 1726, a mob riots at the market and sets fire to the city's pillories and stockades. Franklin seeks another way.
Franklin was grand in his imagination that you could make a miserable, dirty, dangerous city a better place.
He organizes a dozen working men into a civic force called the Junto.
He's saying, here's a problem, it must be addressed. Let's do it ourselves.
Benjamin Franklin is a planet. He draws everything towards him. He loves being the center of attention.
Franklin really was an excitement junkie. He enjoyed the bonhomie of his friends at the Indian Head Tavern. With the Junto, these men are talking about ideas.
They help each other, they network for each other, and promote each other's businesses at every turn.
The city's problems compel the Junto to turn their focus to Philadelphia itself, plagued by the scourge of house fires. When fire breaks out, residents must form a human chain to pass buckets while the city burns. How can they do better?
What is a way for us to diminish the risk of fire spreading from one building to another?
The Junto organizes the first volunteer fire company in the British colonies, the first insurance company to protect their homes, and a town watch.
If there was a better way to do it, then Franklin was interested in finding that better way.
How can I light a street better? How can I make the sanitation better? How can I take all the offal and the waste and drive it away so that there's less stench and people will walk on the streets?
They needed to do more to learn more.
James Logan specifically mentored Benjamin Franklin. His coming to use his books, borrow his books, was a foundation for a lot of learning that would take place in Philadelphia.
Franklin really wanted to get hold of that library.
James Logan agrees to help the Junto create another first, a public library. But Franklin wants more.
Benjamin Franklin taught himself to read late at night using the light of a candle. He is motivated to make sure that literacy happens in Philadelphia.
When Franklin seizes ownership of Philadelphia's largest newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette, he outsmarts his rivals and builds a platform for his voice.
The newspaper gives him the ability to turn information that he's receiving into print and then distribute it across the colonies.
Franklin created an information age.
Creating more literate people means creating customers for himself. He's very shrewd.
Not only did he publish the paper here, but up and down the eastern seaboard, down into the Caribbean. Franklin's opinions were known far and wide.
It's the first media empire in the New World. But everywhere, Franklin profits heavily from printing advertisements for the sale and capture of enslaved Africans.
History has been very kind to Benjamin Franklin, but when you think about what was happening in and around Philadelphia, particularly as it pertained to enslaved people, you wonder why he didn't speak out more.
Franklin represents the enlightened men of Philadelphia. That is, he owned slaves.
Then let's remember this. Slaves themselves were machines. That's a crude way to put it. But Quakers thought, if we forsake slavery, are we forsaking profit?
Despite their opposition to violence, Quakers profit handsomely by trading humans alongside sugar, coffee, and rum. From the auction block at Front and Market to what is now Washington Square, where African religions flourish, slavery lodges firmly in the bones of the city.
The economy of Philadelphia, just like a number of other economies throughout the South, was built and bred on the back of enslaved men.
At Stenton, Sampson is desperate. But with more than 1,000 Africans enslaved in Philadelphia, he knows he'll never find freedom on James Logan's estate. While Sampson runs, Logan plots to expand freedom for his people. He engineers a false land deal with Native Americans, a double cross known as the walking purchase.
What James Logan did was hire runners to run a relay and steal as much land as they could.
The Lenape people living on the walking purchase land were forcibly removed from their homes.
Millions of new acres now draw Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and German squatters in search of religious freedom and fertile land.
The Port of Philadelphia sees ships come in that are so stuffed full of people, you can't keep people away.
Pushed west, the Lenape and the Susquehannock fight for survival.
Indian tribes were staging attacks of various sorts against settlers.
There are accounts of a schoolhouse that someone's walking by and suddenly notices that there's no sound of people chanting their lessons, and everybody's dead. These are attacks that were meant to terrify and did.
The terror turns to war. Settlers join the young Virginia Colonel George Washington in a bloody campaign to seize land from Native Americans and push their French enemies out of North America.
Pennsylvania avoided war longer than any of the other English colonies.
People in Philadelphia fear the French and Indian War because they imagine it is happening on their edge.
People in the countryside are convinced that people in the city do not understand what's going on. They want to get better publicity. So they take scalped, mutilated bodies of their own dead, put them in carts and bring them into Philadelphia. They make it real for them. Look at this. Look at what death looks like in a time of war.
What does the government do if not protect its citizens?
For years, Franklin rages against Philadelphia's refusal to adopt military defenses.
The peculiar government of Pennsylvania, dominated by Quakers, is not about to spend money either arming troops or killing Indians.
The Quakers believed the settlers were a bunch of provocative thugs, deliberately creating controversy and stirring up trouble with the Indians.
Franklin says the military bill isn't happening, the money spending isn't happening. Let's form a militia.
Franklin does what he does best. He gathers other leaders to pull together an all-volunteer force.
He personally leads it for a while, out on the frontier in the midst of attacking Indians and marauding settlers and all the rest.
He wants to create the notion of citizenship, and citizenship has responsibilities. That's what Franklin is up to.
When a house on Logan's plantation burns down, the governor suspects his escaped slave, Sampson. He organizes deputies for a manhunt.
The hand of James Logan must have moved throughout Philadelphia. And Sampson challenged that. This overwhelming desire to be free can push up against anything, even the most powerful man in the city.
In the Wissahickon Woods, Sampson discovers an underground network of schools run by free blacks and Quakers.
Black Philadelphians, free and slave, live often in close contact with one another.
Free blacks recognize the importance of collaboration. You were only as free as your neighbor was.
After days of chase, Logan's deputies haul Sampson before a special court. Franklin reports on the case, keeping it in the public eye.
Pennsylvania Gazette, September 1st, 1737.
Monday last, Sampson the Negro man had his trial. He made a long, artful, and pathetic defense. He was found guilty and received sentence of death.
But the death sentence sparks a debate. James Logan brings the case before his governing council.
So when the Quakers are debating what to do about him, what they're really talking about is how to make sense of this whole question of slavery.
In other colonies, rebellions meet a brutal response, with scores of slaves massacred and burned at the stake.
In Philadelphia, there were abolitionists, none more colorful than Benjamin Lay, who posted pamphlets all over the city railing against other Quakers' involvement in slavery and stormed into Quaker meeting houses.
With Logan's court debating Sampson's case, Lay disrupts the annual meeting of the Society of Friends. He drives a knife into a Bible where he has concealed a pouch of red dye. His point is not subtle. Philadelphia's elite have blood on their hands.
They finally decide to banish Sampson out of the colonies. We don't know if the Quakers had helped him to get wherever he ended up being. He's heard from no more.
But Sampson has planted a seed. That same year, Benjamin Lay convinces Franklin to print a manifesto urging all Philadelphians to confront an evil so many support.
Quakers in Pennsylvania really wrestled with slavery. The ending of slavery took time. Everything with Quakerism takes time.
Spurred by a groundswell of protest, Quakers succumb. Now, they will excommunicate any member who holds a slave.
Franklin's an urban man. He's a product of the city. He was always comfortable in the hardscrabble world of a city where civilization is best expressed.
Philadelphia becomes his laboratory. Franklin believes he can seize a lightning bolt and transform it into electricity.
What he does next with that information is what makes him a hero. He invents the lightning rod. Now, when the lightning comes down, your house does not burn. Your family is safe. And this is a revolution. This is progress.
Franklin noticed that in London they had globe streetlights that quickly filled up with smoke. They gave off little light. Any little boy could throw a stone at them and break it. Franklin and his friends discovered that if they had a 4-pane glass light, it would be easier to replace the wick, easier to keep clean, harder to break the whole thing in one stroke.
And they were interested in meteorology, geology, electricity, botany, a thirst for knowledge.
In creating the bifocals to see near and far, and who better than Franklin to see near and far, that itself says something about him.
Franklin's ambition drives him to reinvent the whole city. In 1751, the year of James Logan's death, Philadelphians elect Franklin to the Pennsylvania Assembly.
Franklin takes over Logan's position as the broker, but a different sort of broker between the gentry and the working class. He has the confidence and the trust of both sides as few people ever have anywhere in American politics.
He is gaining the power to make his city London's rival, and himself its major player.
How do we run a society when the source of government is 3,000 miles away? How do we get things done?
Philadelphia moves from being a place that needs merchants, longshoremen, and sailors to being a place that also needs doctors and lawyers and teachers.
This work is Franklin's life. The result is a boom town, a school that will become the University of Pennsylvania, the nation's first hospital, Pennsylvania Hospital, a state capitol, what we know as Independence Hall, and the tallest building in North America, Christ Church, whose spire towers over the largest food market in the colonies.
Visitors who come to Philadelphia from England are stunned by the visible signs of wealth and flourishing. Philadelphia now is an enviably well-off, well-organized, attractive place.
But violence on the frontier threatens to explode in the streets. Refugees pour in from French Canada and central Pennsylvania, seeking shelter.
The Native Americans themselves were never defeated. When they hear that France has capitulated and given all of their territory to the British, they are by no means willing to abide by that.
A peace treaty brings even less satisfaction to settlers in the Susquehanna River town of Paxton. They insist on total control over the land and will wage total war to get it.
The Paxton Boys in 1763 savagely murdered a group of Christian Conestoga Indians living peacefully along the frontier. Their attack appears to be unprovoked.
It's a surprise attack. They kill women and children along with men. They burn the houses down. They mutilate and burn the bodies of the dead. They scalp their victims. This is theatrical violence.
The Paxtons now take aim at Philadelphia. They march east, looking for the man who controls the presses.
Philadelphia is a kind of magnifying glass. This is the home of the one broadcast medium that they have. It's where you become visible.
When the news came, the city was in an uproar.
Benjamin Franklin writes, describing the ways that Native people, their families, have been butchered.
He calls them Christian white savages. People in Philadelphia think that they're coming there in order to kill all of the natives who are sheltering in the northern part of the city, and Quakers, too.
The city shuts down. Ferrymen remove their boats from the river.
Franklin and other politicians from Philadelphia race out to Germantown to try and stop the Paxton Boys before they arrive.
Franklin's militia waits for Paxton emissaries in the woods outside Coleman's Tavern in Germantown.
They were angry. Too many kin, too many friends killed, and they wanted something done.
But his own militia spoils for a fight. They've seen enough of the Paxton menace.
Franklin is a pragmatist. He is trying to find a way forward through the morass.
Benjamin Franklin, the most brilliant negotiator in the Americas, quells the violence.
The Paxton Boys demand that Native Americans be removed from Pennsylvania permanently.
Had they met with blank refusal, had they met with contempt, they would have gotten tens of thousands more for a march on Philadelphia.
Franklin promises to broadcast the Paxtons' demands. And as Philadelphia's presses roar with arguments about liberty and democracy, debate spreads to town squares from Williamsburg to Boston.
You can't talk about the history of Philadelphia without Benjamin Franklin. Who do we want to be as a people? What type of city do we want to have? How do we want to have our contributions known to the rest of the world? Franklin used Philadelphia as a canvas in which to paint this.
Franklin made Philadelphia the central node in a modern information system that has very few equals in other parts of the world.
This is where the entrepreneurial spirit in America really took off, the American identity.
Inventors, searchers, revolutionaries whose spirits pulse through the city's history.
It is the 18th century's legacy to the 21st century Philadelphia.
This is the model city for what American independence is going to mean.
In the aftermath of the Paxton crisis, Benjamin Franklin will travel to London on a mission to solidify American ties to the crown. But Philadelphians have their own ideas, and the city's most brilliant diplomat will soon find himself caught between two powerful forces on a collision course.
you.